What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Recover Out Loud, episode number 49, brought to you by the Antisocial Network. Before we get into my guest, that was an awesome intro video. Brand new. You're the first one that a day's debuts on, so it's super cool. My buddy Embalm at the Embalm Effect made it. I'm like really happy. I told him what I wanted. I sent him the song, and he was like, "I got you." When I got it, I was just like giddy. Just like, oh yes, yes. I'm terrible at editing, so that was like super awesome, especially with the flame at the beginning. But anyways, we're not here for me. We're here for Mitch. How you doing, Mitch?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good.
Nice, nice. And so I met Mitch through one of the podcasting pages, one of the few podcasting pages I'm a part of. And he reached out and said, was trying to see if he'd be a good fit. And you know what? You're a great fit. You fit in right perfectly here, man. So, Mitch, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mitch Harley. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and kind of, I guess, the entrepreneur lifestyle. You work through it, which has a lot of struggles. So it's a mixture of coming in and out of corporate world, doing my own thing, and where I've kind of landed now is I do podcast coaching and training. And so we've opened up classes for that. I've been in the podcast world for a few years now. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. And I'm on this new journey. And along that way, I've found how much I needed personal development and how important that's been. And that has opened up so much in my life. And that's what really led me into your show and where I felt there might be a really good fit there and some value brought to your audience.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm grateful to have you on the show today. To be honest, it's not very often that I get people from outside the United States or even in Canada. So for your participation, man, I want to say thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I've driven through Canada. I've driven through Alberta. It's a very beautiful country or a very beautiful province. But what is it like now in this time of year in April?
So here's kind of neat. So I was born northern Alberta. Not to say that was like igloo territory, but it's definitely colder. Snow, like it's the winters are harsh, right? They're definitely cold. It was up by the Edmonton area. And then after I graduated, I moved out to British Columbia. So once again, northern BC. And same thing, kind of long, lots of snow winters, but yet the summers could be extremely hot. Like where you're inside, you're like, I'm not going outside. It's way too hot. And that's not just from it being a baby because, we're not used to that. It's like, no, this is like New Mexico weather, like just crazy, crazy swings in temperature. So that's kind of the northern belt that you end up with. And then when I moved here, Calgary's got a really unique weather system because we get these Chinooks. So we can drop down to, up here we're Celsius, we can drop down to that -20, -30 Celsius for a period of time. But in a week or week and a half, it can all of a sudden be +10. So, we've got these massive. So right now, we're coming into spring. And in the same city, so my girls, they live with their mom in the north end of the city and I'm in the south. They came over to my house this morning and they're like, Dad, you have no snow. Where's your snow? And I'm outside in a t-shirt. When I'm shopping this morning, I'm outside in a t-shirt and there's trucks driving around with snow on the hoods. And I'm going like, where did they come from? Because like it's nice out right now.
And it's a completely different life.
So these Chinooks come in and it's this belt that just warms everything up. I've been on, when I was in the trades, I've been on roofs in December and it's just pool. I'm trying to keep the water away because it's melting so fast because we can have a 15 to 20 degree shift. So the weather's really wild here. It can go up and down. And Canada's huge, right? The weather patterns. So you kind of across the states too. You got from LA to New York, you can have some wild variations there. Yeah. And that's kind of our Vancouver to Toronto. You can have a vortex going on, of polar vortex out in Ontario and Toronto. And yet you can have, Vancouver just shining like crazy or raining like nuts. So it's pretty wild, but Alberta as a whole is, it's gorgeous. Alberta is one of the few places that has every kind of landscape you can imagine. We've got the Rockies, on the west side of the whole border. We've got world renowned, like Banff National Park. That's about an hour away from me, and it goes all the way as it stretches across. We've got the hills. We've got Drumheller, which is world famous for dinosaur, excavation, and some deserts in there, and then out to the prairies. And so it's a really neat place to be. A lot of movies are shot here. The last big one that was shot that everyone still talks about, The Last of Us, that was all filmed right here.
Oh wow!
Within a couple miles. They shut downtown down. I remember all the cars on the overpass that were all muddied up, and driving by the film set. So it's cool to be a part of that and to live in an area that is really unique around the world.
That is pretty awesome. I drove through Alberta to get to Alaska. I used to live in
Yeah,
Alaska, and I, Alberta is the first place that I've ever experienced like negative Fahrenheit weather, and
it can be cold. It's dry though. So that's the
yeah,
difference here, right? Like when it gets down to minus, so the coldest that I've experienced here growing up and, being an adult here was about minus 43.
mm,
That was pretty wild. Like that's the temperature. You go throw a cup of water outside and it freezes.
yep,
Like you don't spend time outside when
no,
when it's that cold. Like BC very rarely does it get that cold in the northern parts, but it's because it's close to the coast, right? So it's
yeah,
a damp cold. So cold in Vancouver, like minus 3, 4 in Vancouver, is a different feel because of the humidity level.
yeah.
But yeah, so when you drive through and it's like this is the first time it's been really stinking cold, that's a bit of a wake up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. To be honest, man, I would say that it was a lot colder driving through Canada than I have ever experienced in Alaska.
Yeah,
Like, no
but
joke.
Alaska's damp cold, right?
Yeah,
Alaska's very, very coastal.
yeah,
So when you're on the inland, it really, really gets you.
yeah.
You can't warm up.
No, no, absolutely not. Everything freezes. It, like you said, it's one of those colds. You step outside and you're like, I'm good. You go back
Yeah,
inside.
yeah. You can't touch the door handle. You know, it's
Yeah,
that cold.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
two summers ago, it was so hot. I was working with a landscaping company, and we had a guy full time on a hose
Mhm.
cooling off the guys
Wow.
because you couldn't work for more than 15 minutes, and we only worked a half day.
Yeah,
So, like I said, like that's the temperature swing you can get here. So to climatize, it's not like it's cold all the time or it's hot
yeah,
all the time. Like our closets are full because we need clothing for everything. So
yeah,
that's how I grew up.
yeah.
Was in a climate like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say like the whole country of Canada is just absolutely beautiful driving through. You know, you got your small little towns and your bigger cities, but like in the prairies, it's absolutely beautiful. You can see for miles and miles. When I was over in the west, going through the Yukon, that's absolutely stunning. Never seen a buffalo in my life until then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, no,
pretty.
it's pretty wild, especially when you get a little bit north. Like for you to go to Alaska, did you go through northern BC or did you go all the way up through Alberta and then over, or did you
Up
kind of
through Alberta.
yeah? So there's also so if you're coming up the coast to go up to Alaska, a lot of people take that and they end up going through like Dease Lake and then up they hit like Skagway and up. Whereas here you'll go up and you'll hit a little bit north of Skagway, but there's there's some places where like buddies of mine they'll go like they get a draw and they'll go for a buffalo in like northern BC,
Mhm.
and they come back with a buffalo on their truck. Like that's a pretty wild experience to
Yeah,
get those animals. Like you can see them on TV, even moose, like especially in the northern, like your Alaska moose, your Yukon, northern BC. Like you can say, oh, that's a big animal until you've put one on your trailer, until you've got a rack on your trailer and a buffalo, until you actually try to pick one up. Like
yeah,
that is some of the biggest animals that you will ever be able to match, especially in North America for sure. It's
yeah.
probably one of the biggest animals in North America.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Like living in Alaska where I lived, they did not mess with the wildlife. They just pretty much said, "Let the wildlife do what they're gonna do." And I walked outside one morning for work, and there's a mama moose and a baby moose, just or calf, right outside of my door, just sitting there. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I can't go to work.
I've been trapped. I've been
Yeah,
trapped in from a bear
yeah,
outside of my door. I've been trapped. Which is funny because this makes me sound like I'm like living off in this, little hut village in the middle of nowhere, and like that stereotypical Canadian. I was living in a city.
yeah,
Like this is inside of a city. It's just that there's this green belt that all the wildlife come down, and when you pan out, this is what's amazing about Google Earth. You pan out in Canada, you go to a big city. So like northern BC, I lived in a city that was about 100,000 people. If you pan out outside of that 100,000 people, like it's it's wilderness.
yeah,
And so when you think if you took the trees away, what would animals would be left? I mean, you've got lynx, mountain lion, you've got wolves, coyotes, fox, and then you get into like your deer, moose. Like it's a pretty wild thing. And to think that we're in their world, they're not in ours. And so yeah, I've been trapped in. I've had a moose and her calf, and I'm like, I can't even get to my car because she's gonna kill me.
yeah.
Like they're just so protective. I've had bears corner me. I was walking home one day, and the two black bears came out, and I was like, I called for help because I'm like, I can't outrun these things.
No,
If they're scared, I'm hooped. So
yeah,
I've had quite a bit of that. I haven't had some of the really scary experiences. Like, I've come across grizzlies, but like polar bears, like that's kind of that's a little bit north, more of like towards northern Manitoba and the Northwest Territories. But like, yeah, that's kind of another. You can't talk your way out of a polar bear.
no,
You can
no.
talk your way out of pretty much anything else. But
Yeah, yeah. You get close to a polar bear, you might as well have a last will and testament.
yeah,
Things that
that
eat you
is
alive.
as I think as far as land predators, they are the not just the biggest, but they are the like most dangerous. Next to
Yeah,
like once you're in Africa, you've got like hippos. I think are number one in the world, but polar bears are right up there. It's a pretty wild. And so to think that like I said, Canada's huge. Like I think to go to one end coast to coast, it actually consistent driving I think is 5.5 days
whew.
nonstop because it spans out quite a bit more than the American
Mhm.
border.
Yeah,
So for like to go to Vancouver to Toronto is
mhm.
about I think it's 42 hours driving, and then
Mhm.
Toronto's only halfway
Yeah,
because you can go all the way out to Newfoundland, the Maritimes, right?
yeah,
So it's a pretty vast. So you get lots of different climates, lots of different like you get all the landscapes, all the climates, all the wildlife, all the types of people.
yeah.
It's a pretty neat place to be a part of.
Yeah, I'll say when I was driving through, the Canadians definitely did not meet the stereotype of what you hear. That all Canadians are just mean to Americans. But every Canadian I've come or that I encountered was just the most amazing human being alive.
Yeah,
They were more than
and a
willing
lot
to.
of that. So it's neat because we do have this, on the world stage, Canadians have kind of this everybody's friend stereotype, and part of that is because we don't have a huge population, right? Like as a country, we're 33 million people. So 33 million compared to 300 million in the States. Like, so that joke that everyone knows each other, it's not that out of line. Like, it's not.
Yeah,
Because unless you're in any of the four major cities, like even in the city that I was in previously, so we had about 90,000 people, 100,000 surrounding. Um, I called it the biggest little city I've ever seen because it was one of those places where it was based off a union mill. It was based off the railroad. So long-term families that have been there over generations, and literally everyone knew each other. I could go to the mall and I knew the same people that went to the mall. Whereas if you went to another place like in the States that had 100,000 people, no one would know each other.
yeah,
It's a very different culture, and there's so many small towns in Canada across the nation.
yeah.
It's just you grow up knowing everybody. And so unless you're in a city of 1 million plus people, it's more likely to know someone across Canada than it is probably anywhere else in the world just because of the low population.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we had hit a little bit about this before. You live in the same town that Bret Hart, famous
Yeah.
hitman. How like is he like a national treasure up in
So
Canada?
Canadian, yes, like in the wrestling world, definitely. Locally, more so. And part of that is not just because of celebrity status. Like celebrity status, a lot of people come from Canada, a lot of celebrity status. Like even in Calgary, like Calgary, we call it like so Alberta is what we call the Texas of Canada, right?
Yeah.
And Calgary is the heart of that in that sense of like the Calgary Stampede is world famous,
Yeah.
and that is country music, rodeo, party, like that's the life. And so the country music that comes out of Western Canada, I mean, it's massive. So, celebrity status isn't, there's lots of different celebrities that come out of Canada, but the interesting thing about the Hearts is the community involvement. And that's where it's not just about, oh, it's a neat thing that he's a part of it. No, he is so involved, and the family has been so involved in the community in doing things. And like I mentioned before, they've opened up a new place, like a new nightclub bar. And it's just everything they do is for the community. And that's kind of been a legacy. And so back when his dad was running Stampede Wrestling,
Yeah.
that was a big thing because it involved the community. People would come, it was entertainment. And then when they got bought out by, at that time, the WWF, it just changed things. And it was like everyone had pride because they were like, this is cool because it started here. And so it was that sentiment. And, now that it's even getting bought, that's even being bought out on a multi-billion-dollar level. It's pretty amazing to see where it escalated, and to think that started as in somebody's basement here. And he is not a guy, and there's so many stories ripping around, but he is not a guy that when he drives downtown, if you were to see him, he'd be looking down. Like you would, unless you knew who he was, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
He loves people. He loves helping. He loves, he's some of the stories I've heard, like the radio announcers here were telling a story. They were at an event, ended up back at his place. He drove everybody home because he was the only sober one. Like, wow. He's just that figure. Right. And so, yeah, you get the stage, you get those personas because of entertainment world, but he is a super nice guy. He's done a lot for the community, and there's people here that fully appreciate that of him. He's not one of those guys where it's don't meet your heroes. Yeah. He lives up to it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Tribute to him.
I've heard amazing things about the whole family, and not to mention the late Owen Hart.
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but amazing stories about them. So I'm happy to hear that it lives up to the legend.
It definitely does. Definitely does.
That's awesome. All right, so Owen Hart, Bret Hart, Calgary, Alberta. That's not why we're here. We are here to hear Mitch's story. All right, Mitch. So, what was it like when you were in your struggle, man?
So, it's been interesting because struggle. When you say you're in your struggle, everyone has a different story, and it's really, we hear so many stories of people that are like, I was homeless, I was addicted to drugs, or I was, an alcoholic and I lost my family, or, kind of pretty major things. And I used to think it's like, well, I was never on drugs. I never had an addiction problem. So I must have never struggled. And that's just not true. That's just not true. People struggle with different things. We all have an addiction. And that's something we have to understand about ourselves. We all have an addiction. And when that addiction is not physically harmful, we call it a hobby. Yeah. But it does the same thing. We are looking for something to escape. We are looking for something to help recharge. And we're looking for something that brings us dopamine. For me, it's people. That's been my addiction. And it hasn't been until recently that I've actually been able to control that. And when I say my addiction was people, like there was a time where if I was by myself and I wasn't talking to somebody on the phone, like I'd shake. Yeah. That's an addiction. Yeah. And that stemmed from, to be honest, a huge bullying problem. Yeah. And so always looking for external validation, needing to be around people to validate myself. And so I'm 34, and it's just, in the past little while that I've actually come to that realization. So you think that you're dealing with all of that, you're going through life, married, have kids, and you're struggling with this in the background, and you don't even know why you're struggling with it. If you're shooting up every day, you know what your problem is. How you address it, what you want to do with it, that's up to you. But when you're dealing with anxiety and stress, you don't know, because you don't necessarily recognize it. It's not something you can go to the doctor for. It's not something you can go get into a program for. And so that's a struggle. And I see that is a huge thing right now. I mean, we see this big push for men's mental health, but I think it's so much more than that, because it's not just about mental health. It's like saying there's an obesity problem, so we have all these diets. They do nothing. Diets do nothing. They sit on a shelf, and that's good. Does it fix the problem? Yeah. And the problem is us as emotional human beings, and as people that it is important to understand and apply personal development. Personal development. So lately I've been really harping on certain people, and there's these girls that are like, oh, I'm going to stay single. I'm working on myself. I'm like, no, Tiffany, you're just getting drunk on a Friday. That's not working on yourself. That's being by yourself with your friends and doing whatever the heck you want. That is not working on yourself. You are able to work on yourself with a partner. You're able to work on yourself alone. It's how you're doing it that's important. So for me, I had to take that to heart, going through a divorce and kind of figuring out, like, how do I not end up in this situation again? Financially, totally done. Businesses went under. Like, you want to talk about starting over, like losing my car, like, I name it. I've been through it. Yeah. And so after, here's a story. It's pretty recent. It's pretty fresh, and it's still a little bit hard to get through. But so going through separation and figuring out what am I going to do, and still at a point where it's like, I don't know how to be alone. I don't know how to be single. And so you start seeing a few people, and I realized that was looking back, terrible thing to do, because I was not in the place to do that mentally. But I had this need to be with people, to be with somebody, and that was I get heartbroken over like nothing, and I couldn't figure out why. It's like, oh, this didn't work out with this person, and it broke me. And so a little while later, I connected with somebody that was like, why don't you come to one of these classes? Just come to a class, work with me. Nothing comes of it, fine. But I'm putting it on, and I could use the support as a friend. I'm like, yeah, totally. I'm all about supporting people. Yeah. And I had this emotional breakdown in this program, to the point where, like, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating. And so at the end, she pulled me aside, and she's like, what did you come to? Like, what was your emotional breakthrough, your emotional release? And I was like, that I'm allowed to be happy. Like, that statement on its own is so powerful, because what I realized was wasn't allowing myself to be happy. I didn't think that I deserved to be happy for a number of reasons. But when you cannot create your own happiness, you're looking for happiness. And so what I started doing was saying, hey, that person, they make me happy. And so I would latch onto them. And so now all of a sudden it's like, well, that guy love bombs, or that guy's super, attached. And all of a sudden these red flags start getting attached to you. And when really all you're doing is searching for happiness. And so then it was like, if that person left my life, my happiness was gone. My happiness just left. A person didn't leave my life. My happiness left. And when I broke through that and said, no, I am my happiness. I deserve to be happy on my own and create my own happiness. If someone comes into my life, they add to my happiness. They're a part of my happiness. but they are not the source of it. And so when I started realizing that people can come and go and that I can create happiness alone, man, like what a life-changing thing that was for me to discover. And that created this whole new concept where somebody could come in the room. It didn't affect where I was. It didn't affect my emotions. I could still feel sadness. If someone hurt or disappointed me, I could still feel that, but I wasn't devastated. Yeah. Credit card company called, say, hey, you're behind on your payment. Okay, I'll deal with it. I'll figure out a plan. Wasn't devastated. It didn't affect me because I was happy. Yeah. I'm happy. And so that was a huge thing for me. And so I was like this new version of me that I'm ripping around the city now in, being like, I'm so happy. This is amazing. And so she called me and she goes, I have another class. Do you want to do another one? And I'm like, sure, but I'm good. Like, I'm super happy, right? Like, I'm cured. I'm fixed. And she's like, well, we'll see what happens. So
that's a foreshadowing.
Yeah, exactly. So I go to the next one. And it's same thing, like just full meltdown. I actually threw my back out. That's how much of an emotional, release came. And this one was huge because this one goes back to a really sensitive subject of bullying. So when I was in school, I was what I call the runt. We always joked that they created blue participation badges for me because like I couldn't do nothing, man. Like I couldn't even come in last if I tried. And so physically I just was not that athletic guy. Even schooling, like passing for me was a win. I had a couple good years, grade 7, 8, and I wasn't cool. Girls didn't like me. Like I wasn't that guy. Yeah. So that's kind of the little Mitch version, right? Nice kid, loved his parents, loved a lot of people, had friends, but didn't have respect. I think that was what could sum it up. And there's 2 days in school that really stood out to me, and these were the 2 days that came out through that session. And there was 4 guys. They were all hockey players. This was about grade 5, and they took turns on me in front of the class, and the whole class was sitting there watching, and they were just pounding on me. And I just kept getting up. I couldn't do anything about it. And anyway, they left, and then all of a sudden all the sport came up. It's like, oh, I can't believe they did that. Or, their girlfriends came over, and it's like, I'm really sorry about that. And I'm sitting here going like, why are you sorry? He's your boyfriend. Either leave him or tell him to change. Like to me, it was a very logical situation. I'm like, you're still with him. Like you're still the prom queen, and you're not doing anything about it. So it left this really bitter taste in my mouth. But I always told myself, no matter how much stronger somebody is than me, I'm never going to not get up. And throughout high school, it was the same thing. There was times where, it's like someone's like, oh, I'm going to beat you up. I'm like, well, you can. You physically can. You're stronger than me. You know how to fight. That's fine. I'm not scared of you. And that was just my mentality going through school. So through this session, I could see this little Mitch. And I said to myself, if he could see who I am now, what I've accomplished, what I've pushed through, who I've become, what the definition of late bloomer is, what would he think? And I just remember just breaking down because I'm like, he would look at me and be like, there's no way I grew up to be that guy. There's no way. That guy's way too cool. He's way too cool. And there's no path that I could ever become him. Because he's cooler, he grew up cooler than everyone else that I'm trying to validate with in my class. And that just broke my heart because all I wanted to do was tell him that I'm proud of him. And so when those two things met, that changed everything for me. Because I was like, it's so easy to come down on yourself and say that you don't deserve, you're not good enough, you don't deserve to be happy, you're not financially successful. You have a failed relationship, all these things are starting over. Your business is struggling. But who am I competing against?
Yourself.
And do they even know? And it was explained to me in business, but you can apply this into your life. If you're competing with someone, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to compete with Sean. I'm going to be better than Sean. I'm going to just crush that guy. Does Sean even know that I'm competing with him?
Yeah.
Are we playing by the same rules?
Yeah.
Do we have a finish line? In basketball, there's a defined set of rules. In football, everyone knows that at the end of the clock, whoever has the highest score wins. They know that if you take your ball to the end zone, you get a point. Here are the rules. Here are the boundaries. And here's the winning. In life, we don't have that. At what point do I win? At what point have I beat you? Are you even competing with the same rules? So the only people that we are competing with are ourselves. And for what? Why? If I'm sitting here beating myself up, picking bad relationships because I'm not good enough, because I can't find happiness, and the me growing up goes like, what are you doing? Like, you are phenomenal. I'm so proud that that's my future. And so that was kind of this epiphany that I came up with. And now looking back, it's like the only person I have to make proud is me. And I haven't been fulfilling that.
Yeah.
And to think back, like how much bullying had an impact on that, and how I allowed bullying to continue on in my life, even in the workplace. What I put up with, like I look back, I'm like, I will never put up with that again in my life, because I'm aware now of what that was. In the moment, I had no idea. So that, you want to talk about a journey of struggle in a nutshell, that's kind of what was a big thing for me, and where I've come now, and saying like, no, for one, I'm very vocal on bullying and the variations that we are seeing on a national scale right now of bullying. And I'm very vocal about bullying in the workplace, and I'm very vocal about bullying in school, because I see now that was a huge part of creating limiting beliefs for myself that have held me back from what I view as huge potential. Like, I've got things in the work now that are pretty phenomenal, and I wouldn't have went through with them if I held on to those limiting beliefs, because now I'm actually in a position to help other people, whereas I wasn't before.
No, I was the same as you, man. I always look for happiness, right? I always like, I just have to be happy, or that question of like, why can I not be happy? And I found for me that it wasn't the happiness that I was looking for; it was peace, right? Because I had for so long lived in this chaotic state where everything was just pure chaos. If I walked into a relationship, it wasn't me walking in; it was me breaking through the door, and something chaotic had to happen in order for me to be there and to do that. And so I had to find peace in my life, and once I found peace, that happiness came, right? Just an absolute wash of peace came over, and then the happiness followed. Um, I was bullied too, man. I mean, look at me. I look like Gimli from Lord of the Rings, bro. Like, let's be real. And what you went through, and that level of bullying, man, that's terrible. Absolutely terrible. I'm sorry that you went through that.
It's one of those things where I look back, and because I'm in the mental state that I am now, I can appreciate how it allowed me to build. But, I don't have the belief that you have to go through that in order to learn from it. You just have to believe in somebody that did.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that anyone in school should have to endure bullying. Like, and there's a difference between some light teasing and razzing and just getting someone some thick skin, and going through the physical abuse that I went through on top of that, not to mention that, the mental as well. And it's, you don't even know how much you're affecting somebody when you're going at them. And I think the more that the research and the discovery is going into just how much it affects us, how much trauma we hold into in our life, those little things, they add up. And they, you got people now, we don't even hear about half the amount of stuff that goes on, but you want to talk about like school shootings. Yeah. I think it's a really classic example of like, here's someone that was pushed to their breaking point. We're not going to talk about guns. We're not going to talk about safety protocols. We're going to talk to somebody. We're going to talk about somebody that was pushed to their breaking point. What was that? Because that did not happen a month prior. They got pushed to that breaking point well before that. And when you watch the news after somebody does something like that, whether it's a school shooting or just something, really traumatic, there's the running joke where it's like, what's the reporter say after? And it's like, oh, we had no idea. He was such a nice person. He paid his rent on time. He, did this, or he had. Does paying your rent on time make you a good person? Does paying your rent on time give signals that this is a responsible person? Like, why is that a metric that's being used to measure somebody's mental state and mental happiness? Like, paying rent on time, that just means they got a job.
Yeah.
That's it. Because paying rent on time doesn't make you good or bad. There's good people that are late on rent.
Yeah.
So
that's a conversation nobody really wants to have, the conversation of the mental status of that person,
when you ask someone, are you doing okay? How you doing? That's a one-word answer. I'm doing good. You can easily deflect out of that. When we ask questions to each other, it is so important, our language. And look at the men's suicide rate in North America. It is becoming the number one loss of life. That's phenomenal. Like, fentanyl's coming up there too.
Yeah.
But and overdoses. But so when you talk to somebody and it becomes an easy way for us not to have to actually deal with somebody else. Hey man, how you doing? Good to see you. Doing okay? Doing good?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. How about, hey, what do you need?
Yeah.
Not, can I do anything for you? Because that's a yes or no. Someone like, no, I'm good. What can I do?
Yeah.
And when they stop for a second, because they're going to say nothing, oh, nothing. But you can tell by their hesitation that they have a whole shopping list of things that they actually do need in their life. And not saying that you can fulfill all of them, but you'll know by their response that, hey, there is something they need. And if you actually give a crap about somebody, you're going to find out which ones you can help with. And I'm not talking about money.
Yeah.
And that's something that just we're not taught. That's not anyone's fault. We're not taught in school. We're not taught growing up, or very rarely, how to actually care about somebody else, how to be aware of, mental triggers, to know that guys have triggers the same way girls have triggers. Go into a relationship, try being in your 30s and looking at a relationship. Guess what? You're not dating people that have never been in a relationship. And so you're usually talking and interacting with people that have been through relationships, good and bad. And they all have some sort of trigger. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean they're crazy. We love to label people.
Yeah. Love
to label people. And we label, especially in the dating world, labeling people as crazy. So that's one of the terms that I refuse to use, because crazy is, let's take the medical definition out of that. But when you say that somebody's crazy, oh, that person, they're nuts. No, that person makes you uncomfortable. And then it's easy to label it as crazy, and then it justifies your discomfort. But if you look at it, say, okay, what's going on here? And usually it can be tracked down to a love language that is not being fulfilled. And so when you take a girl, for example, that say her love language is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
If she was in a relationship where the guy didn't talk, guess what? She's not feeling validated. And when you're not validated as a person through how you receive validation, you act out and you search for it. And this is where, get into the cheating conversation. That's where cheating is literally searching for validation that you're not receiving where you are. It's not about sex.
Yeah.
And so when you in a relationship that validates her properly, and if you don't recognize that that's how she needs validation, and you're trying to give her validation in a different way, she's going to act weird. She's going to act out. She's not going to act how she is in her natural state. And guess what? That makes you uncomfortable. And then you say, what? Ugh, she's crazy.
Yeah.
Why? Why are we labeling her as crazy? And guys the same way. Guys receive that. Guys, human beings need validation in a certain form. And we're just so emotionally unintelligent and aware of those things, that until you do the time and until you take in how do people receive validation, you will never have a healthy interaction with somebody in a relationship or friendship or any connection at all. You will never have a healthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of people basing their relationship or their perception of their relationship off of societal norms because we've forgotten what it's like to actually be with that person, right? Because we're so stuck in this mindset of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, versus, hey, I have to have a face to face encounter with you. Like, we got to talk some shit out, or we got to hold hands, or I have to meet your love language. We've forgotten where that connection is, and that's super hard. You talked about, about getting in. I feel like I'm listening to myself when you talk, dude, because like I'm 35, going through a divorce, dating, like I got out of my marriage, and I said, I don't want to trust another woman. I don't want to love another woman. And that's really hard, and I had to get to a place where I was okay before I could step into that realm of dating. Um, but yeah, I literally I'm like sitting here, I'm like, man, this guy's telling my story. It's insane. It's insane. So you're in a position now to help people. What do you do?
Um, so I started experimenting with a curriculum about 2 years ago now. And I created a curriculum of self-awareness. And I first taught it at a women's retreat. And I played around with it. It was a bit of a guinea pig, but it was just about creating awareness of yourself so that you could have healthy interactions with people, whether that was your other half, or whether that was in the workplace, or whether that was just, in regular society. And creating these healthy interactions has to start with you, because you need to pick up on how you're perceived as a person and what you do and how you're perceived. And it's not about changing for other people. It's not about adapting, but it's about accommodating to have the goal, of healthy interactions. And so I started with that. And then I had already been in the podcasting for a while. We've been experimenting, and I started learning just how healthy podcasting can be. So me and my partner decided, let's turn this into a business. It might not work right away, but let's do this full time at some point. So how do we work towards that? So we started building this roadmap, started experimenting a bit. We both had different curriculums. We were both really deep into personal development, and learning what that was. So we started connecting with the right people, having guests on the show. And then what happened was, every time I talked to somebody about what we were doing, the same conversation came up about podcasting. And so I went back to my partner and I'm like, look, there's this commonality in people that we're talking with. They all are interested in podcasting. So why don't we develop a course? And so that kind of developed and, drug on and everything like that. And then I went through my crisis. And then, and in the meantime, I'm going to add this in there. So in September, I fell and I broke both my ankles. And then, so that laid me up for a bit. And then I totaled my car in November, and it blew, some other stuff out. So I've been like physically recovering quite a bit. I'm off of a cane now, and I'm just in rehab.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of up and down. I played hockey for the first time last week. And so all of this is going on. And I'm like, no, I want to figure this out. What do we do? And so what we did is we built a class because it's not that we just don't have the one podcast, we produce and other stuff. And I said, let's build a class for people that want a podcast, that don't have a budget. They don't have this big, capital behind them. They don't have sponsorships. How do we introduce podcasting and give them the tools to overcome the majority of hurdles that podcasters run into? So that's how it started. And so we got that up and running. And then I started doing outreach, started talking to different people. And when you do that, you meet people. And when you meet people, opportunities open up.
Yeah.
So then what happened is I was introduced to a beautiful person. She's in Denver. And she has a program specific to help people coming out of addiction to become addiction coaches. So she doesn't just help people out of recovery, she sets them up. Because if you come out of prison or you come off of an addiction, employment is probably one of the hardest things you have against you, right? You can get assisted living, you can get some handouts. Not that that's what you're looking for, but you can get that help. Getting a job with a record is almost impossible.
Yep.
And a job with any future in it. Like, I'm not talking about like handing coffees over a counter. I mean, like something that'll pay the bills.
A career.
A career. Let's just call it impossible for the sake of it, unless you do something for yourself. So how do you do something for yourself? And so that's what she came up with. She had this program and she's been doing very well at it. So I connected with her because she goes, I've never been introduced to the podcast world, but I've always liked it. Same conversation as everybody else. And so I showed her the program and she goes, what if we set it up a way where, because she goes, people recover in different ways. Some people, they need that boot camp. Some people need, holistic healing. They need some spiritual. So what we decided to do is we augmented the course a little bit, and podcasting, we said, why don't we take that as kind of a therapeutic thing? It's a hobby and it forces you to do work. It forces you to stay on track. There's so many things that come with podcasting that people don't realize. This isn't about becoming Joe Rogan. This is about, hey, I got to show up on time because I got a guest. Hey, I got to go find a guest. Hey, I got to make sure my equipment's running. Hey, I got to make sure all the editing's done. I got to do all these things that come with having and owning a podcast. And I know you relate to this. So there's all this work that comes into it. And what it does is it keeps you busy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're have a major addiction, if you're an alcoholic or you're, shooting up, you are not focused on this. You can't run a show. You don't have the attention to run a show. So having a podcast isn't about viewership. Having a podcast isn't about famous. It's about keeping you in line, building that clarity. And in order to have a conversation like this, you need to have clarity. In order to have a show, you have to have parameters and say, hey, these are the parameters of my show. So when I bring someone on, do they fit those parameters? How do we keep that conversation going? And it's a training ground. Yeah. So the best thing you can do for yourself, trying to stay on track, is see if you can have a show that lasts more than 4 episodes. Yeah. If you can do that, hey, now all of a sudden this helps you stay on track as you're building everything else up. And it gives you credibility because you're putting out a message. So we said, hey, let's take that and let's add that into the program. And so that's what we do. And we haven't launched our first one yet. We're still there's so much stuff to implement into this, but so we're in that direction. It's not the only thing that we're doing, but that's the direction of let's get people into podcasting. And it's not about a celebrity status. It's about getting people to understand, hey, you have to have these traits. And if you want to develop them, a podcast is the way to do that. You have a business, hey, there's a marketing, side to podcasting as well. It's just so diverse. You want to work on your public speaking. Hey, if you sound crappy on a podcast, guess what? You're going to sound crappy everywhere else. Get a podcast going. Yeah. You have all these goals. A podcast is a vehicle for so many different things. And it's such a beautiful thing. And so that's what we're doing is we're training people on how to do the podcast. It's not just about, hey, we'll do your editing for you. Yeah. It's like, no, we're going to show what's your goal. Now we're gonna build you a podcast, or we're gonna augment the one you have to get you to that goal, and we can connect you with the right people.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. There's so much, and I didn't even realize it until you said it. That this plays into my recovery. I've been sober for 3 years. I was peer support specialist in Alaska. I help vets out and stuff. But this plays so much into my recovery because I have to show up. I have to be there. I have to be available. I have to schedule guests. I have to make sure that the guests are that I check in with them to make sure that they're good and that they're still going to be on the show, or how to reschedule. When I got into recovery, I didn't even have a calendar set up. I have a whole Calendly now where it goes straight to my phone, and I'm like, every day, boom, 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 Sunday morning, I look at it, I'm like, all right, what I got this week? Boom, 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 boom. And so and I have to have a coherent conversation. If I can't have a coherent conversation, then there's something wrong. And to be honest, I didn't think I was going to last 5 episodes, and here we are. Here
Yeah.
we are. Episode number 49 is wild.
It's a big deal. And so here's some stats to kind of, really not just pat yourself on the back, but to show that I'm not just talking through smoke here. So the majority, and when I say majority, I'm not just like 51%. I mean like a majority of people that start podcasts do not make it past 180 days or 6 months or 20 episodes. Those are the things. Out of that, the far majority, once again, we're not talking 50%, the far majority do not make it past 4 episodes, which is 1 month.
Wow.
That tells you something. That doesn't tell you that people are like, it wasn't my thing. It's not about not being your thing. It's because it's something that you have to stick with. It's something you have to see through. You have to show up. And I would say, so from my experience, from what I've seen and who I've interacted with, there's a couple reasons why people do not break those barriers. So the fact that you've broken both those barriers is puts you in a category. Yes, there's millions of podcasts out there, but it puts you in a category of podcasts. You're in the minority by sticking through it and showing up and having a show that people can come to, whether that's one person or whether that's 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. That says a lot about where you're at. So you can be really proud of that. But some of the other reasons is people don't understand what podcasting is. They have a perception. And this is a message I've said multiple times on different shows. I've brought it up on business summits. You are not on TV. This is not a TV program. This is not Tucker Carlson. This is your show. And podcasting originally did not have video. It was an online, basically call it a radio show that you could take with you, that you could download, is the true organic start of podcasting. Then it became, hey, I can go on YouTube. But if you have a YouTube channel, but you are only video, that is not a podcast. That's a YouTube show, which is fine. So podcasting means you're on usually multiple platforms. So it takes a lot of work. But people get so focused on the visuals. And whether that's social media based or whatever that reasoning is, but I've had people be like, no, this isn't what I want to do. I don't like this. Where I'm like, okay, if I close my eyes, your content's not there yet.
No.
Your audio quality, your voice quality, it's not there yet. It's coming, but it's not there yet. Who cares about whether you have a neon sign behind you? Who cares about your camera angle? Sorry, but it's not relevant yet.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got the fundamentals of podcasting yet. You should be able to have an audio file that you listen to on Spotify in your car, and it's engaging and nice to listen to for everyone in the car. Topic aside, let's say it's a topic that everyone really enjoys. If you don't have that, you don't have a podcast. If you do, then you can say, okay, how do I beef up my studio a little bit? How do I upgrade my camera? Maybe I should do that. Now I can start doing some clips and stuff. But this doesn't matter.
Mm-mm.
Being in your living room, as long as there's something that doesn't distract, but from an audio perspective, that's what's important. And look at Howard Stern. Howard Stern for years, like you could go on and like they had the camera of him, but it was a satellite radio show.
Yeah.
Satellite radio to me was like, when I started into it, I'm like, it's basically podcasting. Like, I don't know why they have a podcast. They have a show. It's just that I can download the podcast. It's pre-recorded. Whereas their show was live, like the Bonfire on Comedy Central. It was a scheduled show. So that was the difference. But they had a podcast. And now you're seeing TV networks, especially in sports, saying like, hey, check out our podcast. Why? Why are TV networks promoting podcasts? Because it's what people engage with and people want to listen. They want to take it with them. So stop thinking that this is about celebrity status. Even Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's got a beautiful studio. Like, it's so much more than what you see on there, but it's pretty simple as far as camera. Like, there's a curtain behind his guest, and behind him there's like a TV or a sign, and sometimes they do a few things, but it's a desk. Yeah. It's clean, it's cut. It's not a big production. You look at other big podcasts, the one that they had Trump on, the Full Sound Boys.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like an empty room with a couch and some mic stands.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't the important part. This isn't even the entertainment ones are not about entertainment.
Yeah.
It is about vocalizing. It's about showing up. It's about when you run a podcast, like unless you have a production company, it's on you.
Yeah.
You're wearing all the hats. So this is not, hey, I'm Matthew McConaughey showing up. I'm going to talk into the mic, give you some value, and I'm walking out.
Yeah.
This is if I've invited someone on the show that doesn't know how to communicate or is not a conversationalist, guess whose job it is to still put on a good show? It's yours.
Yeah.
Are you equipped to do that? Do you have the resources to be a good interviewer? Joe Rogan is not a great podcaster. He's an amazing interviewer. That guy can interview people and ask the right questions to keep people engaged. That is his superpower. And that's what's kept that show going. Steve-O, it's another one.
Yeah.
His podcast, he interviews people that people want to talk to, but he asks them real questions. He doesn't have scripted questions like the Kardashians.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of podcasting. And so these are all things that play into why podcasting can be a huge thing in recovery in someone's life. I'm not saying it's the way to recover, but I think it's a very untapped thing when it comes to people trying to overcome any sort of addiction, any sort of trauma, and just looking for some sort of structure in their life. This is a pretty simple setup. You got a mic, ring light, some extra features, a mouse, a computer. You get pretty much what we have anyway, because we've been living on Zoom for the past 5 years. And, just apply it to keeping yourself into a regular program. I think it's beautiful. And now look at the amount of information that's floating around out there. Some of it's crap. But for the most part, and the cool thing about podcasting, especially if your message is on point, you bring in a high value guest. When you load something on the internet, we always look, and we're always like, oh, I've only got 100 views. Oh, I only got 50 views. Yeah, now I've come across stuff that's 5 years old.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. This isn't print media.
Yeah.
You can't throw it out. You can scroll by it, but you can't throw it out.
Yeah.
So I think podcasting is absolutely beautiful. I think it's a very underutilized tool, but I also think it's a very misunderstood tool.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Recovery taught me when I got into recovery taught me how to live my life and stuff like that. But podcasting taught me how to give a voice for other people to tell their story. And that's why I started this. I wanted to give a platform for people to share their story, to share their experience, because I know I love to share my experience. I know I love to share my story. I can talk for hours about myself. Yeah. But this isn't about me. I'm the conduit for other people to get their story out there and to share their experience, to inspire somebody else to help them out when they're going when they're in a bad place. And I've had friends that have messaged me and they're like, "You're an inspiration." I'm like, "No, please don't put that on me. Put that on my guests, because they're the ones that are doing the work."
But what's amazing about this too, and this is the same thing, that tool that skill that podcasting teaches you, because you're having conversations, right? For the most part, podcasting are more interesting when there's more than one person. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what it does is, so you can pick any topic. For example, you want to say, "Hey, I've had people come to me and I want to start a podcast about this," and I'm like, "That's cool. You can start a podcast about whatever topic you want. But here's the things you have to think about. Here's where you're building clarity." And I think this is why I keep going back to clarity. I think anything you do in your life, you need to understand just what level of clarity you need to be successful. And whether that's in a relationship, job, career, podcast, whatever, right? So let's say the topic is ice cream. I want to have a show all about ice cream. Cool. How long could you solely talk about ice cream? Right. And maybe ice cream is your life. Maybe you could talk for hundreds of hours about ice cream. You probably could. Can you talk about it and keep someone's attention?
Yeah.
Can you talk? You can talk to yourself. You could lecture. Podcasting is not lecturing. So could you actually communicate with somebody on that topic for hundreds of hours? Well, I don't know. So unless you're clear on that, you're not going to have a show. You're not going to have a show that lasts more than 4 episodes, because you're also going to realize it's like, you may think you know a topic, but try talking for it for 4 hours. Do not deviate. Only talk about it for 4 hours. You will know very soon that you do not know a lot. It's a struggle for you, and communicating that. So you may, so whereas like a topic like hockey, for example, I mean, you can talk about sports, well, but if you why do sports analysts bring on guests? For multiple reasons. One, it gives you more content. You don't have to ramble. You get better perspective. You get high value for an audience, but you get someone bringing in information that you didn't have before. And that's what I think is beautiful about guests. I think it's the best, thing you can do for a show is to have a guest based. I mean, Joe Rogan, that's all it is. It's a show based on high value guests. That's all that is. So when you have your topic, like you're right, your topic well, your story, your messaging, but could you talk for 49 episodes about your story?
No,
there's no way. It just doesn't make any sense not to have it's not a sustainable model. So you can still share your message as a host in increments along the way, open up new little nuggets that add to the conversation. That's what a good host does. And so that's what we teach. We say, hey, like, you're somebody that does not communicate well. Maybe you're somebody that doesn't like people, but you like podcasting. You want to do all these things. Okay. We coach you, not only like my part of the class. I don't teach the technical. I don't really like it. I don't care. Yeah. But I teach you, like, here's how you interview. Here's how you sound clear. Here's how you clean up your voice a little bit. Here's how you communicate. Here's how you Here's how you get guest acquisition. Here's all the things that kind of give you the spark and the charisma so that you can have a nice sounding program. The other stuff, the editing, the intro, super cool if you have it.
Yeah.
But I talked to somebody who used to be in the film industry, and they said if the audio's off, people will leave. But if the video's out by a bit, they'll stick around if the audio's still good.
Yeah.
If there's a glitch or a pause, like you're watching Netflix, something pauses, but you can still hear it, you're not resetting. You're just seeing if it gets better. But if the audio glitches out, you're out.
You're not wrong.
So take those principles. If you have a show or you're starting a show, those are important things that we teach.
That's awesome. I can't believe that, I'm here. Off the statistics that you gave, because I for the most part, I mean, I know people, kind of fall off sometimes and they get back up and they continue on, and sometimes they don't. But I know a lot of successful podcasters that have been doing it 4 and 5 years. And I thought that's what everybody did. You do it 4 and 5 years and you keep going. But the statistic says a lot different. So I'm actually really happy that I'm still here and doing it. And there's been times during this whole run, I'm going on a year now, where I've been like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. Right. And I'm like, man, this is really tedious. This is way beyond my capability. But the thing is I'm doing it. I've done it. I have to keep doing it.
Have you gotten any flack for doing it? Have you ever had any negative responses for doing it?
No, not at all. But it was me beating myself up, right? Like me saying like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not getting the numbers. But the thing is I started this because despite the numbers, I don't care about the numbers. I care about the message. And that's where I had to get back to is I'm seeing 160 subscribers on YouTube, and that's cool. So many on Spotify and Apple. That's cool. But the message is what matters to me. If the message is being delivered, that's what happens.
Put this in perspective. Let's forget all the subscribers on anything other than YouTube. Let's look at them for just a second. 160 people. 160 people would not fit in both of the rooms that we are recording in right now.
Yeah.
So if you were at a house party and feel like you're the guy that everyone's coming to, and there was so many people that they couldn't fit in your house, how would that make you feel?
I mean, pretty awesome.
Why do we not feel that when they all subscribe to our channel?
Yeah.
But yet because we are so inundated with 1 million followers is how you prove that you make it. No, it's not. 1 million followers means jack. And you know why? because TikTok has taught me this. I've got thousands of followers on TikTok, and you know how many of them I know?
Not
Like
very many.
50. If I like really scratch, people that actually communicate with me, people that I've become friends with, like we're talking like less than 50, like maybe 15.
Yeah.
And yet some of my videos have hit 700,000. So what? How has that benefited other than I had a video that cracked the algorithm once?
Right.
There's no value. But people that subscribe, whether you got 5 subscribers or 100 subscribers, that mantra that's like, if I can only affect one person's life, it's a win. That's a tough one in reality. When you have one person in the subscription that you've affected, is that going to keep you motivated to keep going? It should.
Yeah.
But it's a tough one to accept because we are so focused. And a lot of that, so we're going to reverse that. Where's that come from? It's because monetization doesn't come without numbers.
Yeah.
From the platforms themselves. That's it. We're not talking about anything else. Just the platforms don't monetize. But podcasting, there's so many other ways to monetize that people don't know about. And when you are open to those, then it's like, oh, okay, subscribers don't matter. I can monetize this way.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, that when I said originally, like people that fall away or people that don't, it's because it's like, it's a hobby that wasn't paying. Well, so is restoring an old muscle car, but people still dump thousands of dollars into that.
Yeah.
What, if you want to talk, hobbies are sinking ships financially. This is a hobby that could, if done right and you had the right support, could actually, you know, have some ROI on it. If at least break even, like, which is still a win. But there's definite ways to make an income off of podcasting. Like like me and Devin have proven, we now have a class teaching people. Okay, well, we didn't know that starting it. That evolved. So there's all kinds of things that we show people of how to monetize. And I think that's, if you think that the only way to monetize is either get a big sponsor or to start clipping out and get a viral video on YouTube, like you misunderstand everything.
Yeah.
And you're just getting caught up in the minutia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Devin, or Mitch, you said Devin, I'm thinking Devin. Mitch. All right, Mitch, before we go, man, where can we find you at?
So we're all over the map. So our show, our umbrella is called the Perspective Podcast. We're making some moves and teams, but we got our website, perspectivepodcast.ca. You can find us on any of the social media platforms, YouTube, Spotify as well. We have an email theperspective@gmail.com. So yeah, definitely check us out. I think we could bring some huge value, and the teams that we're teaming up with, that'll come out soon. For anybody in that world that wants to get into the coaching world or public speaking world, we're in those groups. And anyone that's looking at starting a podcast, or maybe they're just feeling like they're going to give up before that, you know, mile marker, and they want to give one last kick at the can, it's definitely an opportunity for them to overcome those hurdles. So those will be up on our website in the next little while here. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Mitch, thank you for hanging out with me, man. Thank you for sharing your story and your perspective and all the information on podcasting. I really do appreciate you for your time.
Appreciate you having me on too.
Sweet, sweet. All right, guys, till next time. And I will see you again next time. Be good. Much love.